The Torah tells us, Veikru Yemei Yisrael Lamus, the days of Yisrael. Again, the parsha begins, Vechi Yaakov Beretz Yisrael Shvei Shana. Yaakov lived in Egypt 17 years, but yet, when it speaks about his days coming near to pass away, the Torah speaks about Yisrael. The reference to him goes from Yaakov to Yisrael. And I had mentioned, whenever it has to do with the destiny of Klal Yisrael, or the spirituality of Klal Yisrael, the appellation is always Yisrael. It's not Yaakov. Veikru Yemei Yisrael Lamus. The days of Yisrael came close, were nearing for him to pass away. V'ikra Levno Yosef, and called his son Yosef. If I find favor in your eyes, put your hand under my yerech, my thigh, which alludes to the circumcision. The Balaturim writes over here that no yodcho, the gematria of no yodcho is Mila. We find the same thing with Avraham Avinu, that when he adjured Eliezer, when he went to take a wife for Yitzchak, he said, and he made him take an oath, he says, Simno yodcha tachas yorechi, also. So over there, Rashi says, because when a person makes a person swear, you have to hold an object of mitzvah. That's what Rashi says over by Eliezer. So why did he choose the milah, not any other object of mitzvah? So Rashi says over there, because it came to him with pain, because it wasn't so simple. Milah for Avram wasn't that simple. He was 99 years old when he was circumcised. It's Rashi there. Over here, Yaakov is adjuring Yosef, and he says the same thing. It didn't come to Yaakov with pain. Yaakov was 8 days old when he was circumcised. And yet, again, here, he's saying, when he tells him to take the oath, he tells him to put it tachas yorechi, the milah.
Rabbi?
Wait 1 second. It's interesting. The Chazal tell there were a number of people who were born circumcised. Who are the ones born circumcised? One person, the first person born circumcised was Yaakov. Yaakov was born circumcised. Yosef was born circumcised. David was born circumcised. There were 10 people in the history of the world that were born circumcised, even though the Gemara talks about Noled Mohol. But in terms of, these were those special people, they were born without a foreskin. They needed no circumcision. Esav was born with a foreskin, he was never circumcised. And the Chazal tell us, why wasn't he circumcised? Yitzchak never circumcised Esav, because Esav was red. So the Gemara tells us, we had in Shabbos or a blessed in Milo, that before the blood absorbs into the body, it's like a child is yellow. So there's a question, the child could bleed to death. So Yitzchak was afraid to circumcise Esav, because he didn't know that the redness had to do with what he represented. He thought the blood didn't fully absorb into his system, so by creating that wound, he may actually put his life in jeopardy. And once Esav became older, Esav didn't want to be cut, so to say, and therefore Esav was never circumcised. But Yaakov was never circumcised because he was born circumcised. So Yaakov is asking him to put his hand by the milah, because when you take a shvuah, an oath, especially a Torah oath, you're supposed to hold a mitzvah object. So by Avraham Avinu, you could say because it came to him with pain. But here, I'm asking, did it come to Yaakov with pain? So because he says his father circumcised in 8 days, no, he was never circumcised because he never needed circumcision. So what is the milah? What does that represent? So it said many times in the name of the Or Chaim HaKodesh at Parshas Tazria, that what does the foreskin represent? That's the evil, the Ra of the Eitz Hadas. When Adam ate of the Eitz Hadas, which is Tov Ra, which introduced the essence of evil into existence, that's when Adam grew a foreskin. Till Adam was created without a foreskin. When he ate of that Eitz Hadas, the evil expressed itself as the covering of the male organ. That's what happened. Yaakov never had that, never had a foreskin. So what does that say? That says Yaakov naturally had relevance to the natural purity that he wasn't touched with that evil. Of course, every human being is touched with that evil. But relatively speaking, he had the upper hand over that evil. And it's very good. The Gemara says in Bava Metzia, we will have it eventually, probably in about a year and a half when we get there, that the Gemara says that Shufra de Yaakov may Shufra de Adam. That if you wanted to have an inkling of what Adam Rishon looked like, when you looked at Yaakov, you had an understanding of what an Adam was. In what sense? The answer is because Yaakov had the purity of Adam before he sinned. I had once mentioned that the Rechaim HaKodesh in Parshas Hazinu, based on the Zohar, says that after Adam ate of the Eitz Hadas, originally the tree was meant to bear pure fruit. Once he ate the Eitz Hadas, all the souls that were born to Adam were touched, intermingled with good and evil. The first tree that came about which produced pure fruit was Yaakov Avinu. And that's what he says, the whole concept of 70 versus 1, that Klal Yisrael have the upper hand. We're above the 70. We're able to suppress that. We're able to subordinate that, the evil. Klal Yisrael has the abilities, and therefore the Rechaim HaKodesh says in Tazria, the Jew was given circumcision because by removing that foreskin, we minimize the effect of that representation in the Jew's life. That's what it does. A non-Jew, where his essence is that, cutting off the foreskin is just cosmetic. But Klal Yisrael, where the essence of the Jew has greater relevance to Tov than to Ra, removing that allows the good, which is the essence, to have the upper hand to subordinate the evil. I'm just quoting the Rechaim HaKodesh. That's why the mitzvah of Milah was given to the Jew and not to the non-Jew, for that reason. Okay? Yaakov, not only was he circumcised, he was born naturally. So by Avram Avinu, why did he ask him to put his hand by the foreskin, by the Milah, by the circumcision? So over there he has to say, Avram Avinu wore tefillin. Avram Avinu kept the whole Torah its entirety before it was given. He could have taken a Sefer Torah. Avram Avinu had a Sefer Torah. He had all these things. He had all mitzvah objects, articles. Why the Milah? The answer, so Rashi over there says, the name of the Midrash, because it came to him B'tzar. It was painful. He was 99 years old. But Yaakov Avinu, it didn't come B'tzar. So we asked his father, no. Yaakov, because by him being circumcised represents the ultimate impurity. That he has that direct connection with God. As a result of that gives the Shua, the oath, the greatest level of severity if it should be violated. That's the reason why Yaakov chose the Milah and didn't choose another mitzvah object. Because this is the pure of pure, because it's a representation of Adam before the Chet. For that reason. That's what I was thinking.
I was thinking different, Rabbi.
Okay, you could always think different. We don't always agree, Alan. But at the end of the day, we come to agreement. Why? Because usually Alan realizes what's really right. Okay, good, Alan.
But I was thinking, if we were going to take a shavua, if one of us were going to take a shavua, a serious shavua today, we would probably hold the Sefer Torah, right?
And the Gemara says you hold the Sefer Torah. When
Right.
the Bezdin, when the court would make a person take a Torah oath, you'd have to hold the Sefer Torah.
Right. So I'm saying, so Abraham came through the Milah. It was a painful thing. It was a new mitzvah for him. It was something very special.
Wait a second. Wait. I want to clarify my question. It says
Okay.
there not because it was the first mitzvah. Wasn't. Because it was, I would have said, not like, I would have said because it was the first mitzvah he was given to observe to be obligated. The other was the Noahide laws. But that's what the Medrash says. The Medrash doesn't say that. It says because it came b'tzar. It was painful.
Right. So what I'm going to say is, so maybe the mitzvah for Yaakov, since he already was circumcised, I was thinking maybe it was Gid Anasha. Because Gid Anasha would also give you pain in the under the thigh. In other words, to grab under his thigh, which represented the Milah, maybe Gid Anasha, which is something.
No, a negative commandment is not a mitzvah. A negative commandment is not a mitzvah.
No, but what
A refrain, mitzvah always means something that represents something positive.
Well, I think defeating the angel was a very positive thing.
No. The Gid Anosha represents when the angel touched him in that area, as it says over there, that was to create a level of vulnerability that all tzaddikim till the end of time are vulnerable to the evil, that they were able to somehow to get the upper hand over the tzaddikim. And that's the 10 martyrs, whatever it is. That's Shmad. Shmad means the years when they legislated decrees to destroy the Torah. That's what the Gid Anosha represents. That's the vulnerability. It has no mitzvah say when they take an oath, it's always something represents something positive. Mitzvah say, which is Avos Hashem. That's what it is. So the Gid has no relevance to this.
And the second question is a little sideline, but if Yitzchak realized that Yaakov was born perfectly circumcised and Esau could not be circumcised, wouldn't that have been a tremendous sign to him watching his two sons growing up in terms of differentiating between Yaakov and Esau?
Okay, I'll ask a more simple question. Al asked the more complicated question. I said more simple. Yaakov was a man who never detached himself from Torah. Day and night. Yaakov ish tam Yoshe Olam. Esau was a hunter. He was in the field most of the day. Is there even a question of who should receive the bracha, the blessing? And that's the Sefarnos question. But Yitzchak didn't know he was evil. Of course he knew. He was a man of the world. He wasn't Yaakov, spiritually speaking, at all. But he would be responsible, we remember, with the Yisachar and Zvulun. That's why he held Esau should be the Zvulun. He should be the one who should provide all the material for Yaakov, that he should not be distracted from Torah. That was Yitzchak's understanding of Esau. He didn't understand he was evil, that he was out to destroy Yaakov.
But the deficiency of never having a bris would be a tremendous,
Again, the question is, see, the Medrash says initially he didn't circumcise him because he felt he was like a hemophiliac or something, or eventually he'll overcome this. So the question, but the Medrash says, but he never, when he wanted to do it later, somehow Esau always somehow evaded the question, and Yitzchak never did it. The question is, so why wasn't that the giveaway? That's a question. That's a question on the Midrash. You want to ask me a question? Ask a question. It's a good question. So you could say Esau was such a charlatan and he was so glib-lipped and deceiving, he could come up with some kind of concocted reason which he convinced Yitzchak why he couldn't circumcise himself. Right? That's what as a child, why not? He was an infant. So it says because he believed the Milah would actually put his life in jeopardy. What about later? Once it was late, he wasn't able to do it. Doesn't say why he wasn't able to do it. He didn't say, of course, I'm opposed to what it represents. If he said that, then of course, he's identifying himself what he is. See, evidently he came up with some other reason to explain or to justify why he did it, why he wouldn't do it. Right? It's a question. So we'll have to come up with an answer. Okay? But that's the first thing I was thinking. That's why Yaakov chose the Milah and that didn't choose another mitzvah, although it didn't come to him B'tzar, because for Yaakov, the Milah represented he was never touched by evil, and that's the meaning of the Gemara, that Shufra di Yaakov means Shufra di Adam, that the beauty, the radiance of Yaakov and his holiness had a semblance of Adam's holiness. That's Adam before the Chet, because he was not touched. There was no representation of evil in Yaakov's essence for that reason. And with that, we're able to understand, it says that Yaakov, even Yitro, when Rivka would pass by the Beis Medrash, he would bolt to go out. What do you mean? But in utero, the child already has the orla. How did he have it? The answer is no, because he was born, he wasn't touched with that evil at all. So naturally, like magnetically, he immediately was drawn to whatever that represented. That was Bismeshul Shem Ve'ever. That's the understanding, because that was the essence of what Yaakov was. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh says over there that when we speak about tsaras, which is leprosy, which also represents, there's the Rebbe Bachya cites a picture of Rebbe Lezer that leprosy, like it's similar to psoriasis, that it's rings on the skin. Where do we find rings on the skin? He says you find by the snake. Every snake has rings on its skin. A snake. Before, so the picture of Rebbe Lezer says that when God cursed the snake, because it actually initiated the eating of the Eitz Hadas with Chavin, Odom, God cursed the snake, took off its feet, whatever it is, you should slither on your belly. But it says, the Pir Rebbe Lezer says also that it should have these rings which represents tsaras. The snake is like a leper. Just like a leper is off, similarly the snake is like despised by human beings. They're afraid to be associated with it. They're always separated. They don't intermingle with the human being, the snake. It's off, it's always sequestered away. That's what tsaras is. So over there it says, Ishkiya be'or b'saro nega tsaras. When it speaks of leprosy by a Jew, it says, a person who has nega tsaras be'or b'saro, in the skin of his flesh. So the Orach Chaim HaKadosh over there asks, what does it say? In his flesh. So he explains, and the halacha of negoim, of leprosy, only has relevance to a Jew, not a non-Jew. A non-Jew has no relevance to leprosy. Why? Because he says, tsaras represents, it's ra. It's something that represents evil. The Jew only has relevance to evil, it's only superficial. It's skin deep, so to say. He says by the non-Jew, it's not or besoro, it's besoro. It's the essence of the non-Jew. Has a representation of that evil. The Jew, it's or besoro. It's the same idea. And that's the reason why the Gemara says in Kedushin that machshava tova, HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzaref l'maseh. If a Jew has a good thought to do, even though the act never comes to fruition, he's accredited for doing the good act. But machshava ra, but an evil thought, unless it's actually transgressed, you're not held accountable. By a non-Jew, that's not. Why? Where do we learn it from? You learn it from Lavan. Lavan initially wanted to kill Yaakov and his family because they had fled on the cover of night. And Hashem comes to Lavan and says, you do not touch Yaakov, not good or evil. And yet it says in the Torah, by the Bikurim, by the declaration of the new fruits, we say in the Agora, Arami Oved Ovi, the Aramean destroyed our father. That means Lavan destroyed destroyed Yaakov. So the Gemara asks, but he never destroyed him. So from there we see Machshava Ra HaKadosh Mutzaf Maseh, that an evil thought, even though it never came to fruition, but because if he would have been allowed to do it, he would have. It's all because Hashem intervened, didn't allow it, therefore he's held culpable. But he never did it. He never did the wrong thing. So what's the difference between the Jew and the non-Jew? So the answer is, because a Jew, his essence represents tov, good, represents good. So until he crosses that line, he's not accountable for that. The thought process, when you want to do good, that is your essence. So that you weren't able to do good, something interfered. So therefore you're credited. The non-Jew, on the other hand, his essence doesn't represent good. Therefore, when he has the evil thought, he would have definitely carried it out if something would have intervened. The good action, until he actually actualizes it, there's no indication he definitely would have actually brought it about because his essence does not represent good. And as a result of that, by the Jew, it's or besoro. Tsaras is only skin deep. By the non-Jew, it's besoro. I'm just quoting the Orach Chaim regarding this. That's why the leprosy has no relevance to the non-Jew and only has relevance to the Jew for that reason.
Rabbi,
Yes.
how do we understand that Yitzchak, who was the Ola Tmima, needed a circumcision?